Okay, so welcome back to our facility design procedures and legal issues lecture. We're going to be continuing on with a little bit about liability, where we left off. So all participants must sign a liability waiver, which should be modified as needed to comply with local and national laws. Again, so this may change year to year, month to month, sort of thing. So that's why a strength conditioning director and the individuals in the facility need to stay up on those national and local laws. Reducing liability for on-premise injuries during the use of the facility is critical and is in any risk management strategy. So this should be top priority for that facility. Okay, let's talk about record keeping. Records that should be kept on file at all times, 100%. Cleaning and maintenance, safety procedures, manufacturer's warranties and guidelines of all the different equipment, assumption of risk and or other informed consent forms, medical waivers, clearance forms, personnel credentials, professional guidelines and recommendations, and injury report forms. This should be in a specific designated area, as well as, I would maintain, my suggestion is always to still maintain hard copies in addition to electronic copies in specific, protected folders and so to speak, because you never know when you're going to actually need to pull one of these documents. Liability insurance, something that's also very important for a facility and or for individuals. A contractual promise by which the insurer promises to defend and indemnify the insured up to the defined limits of liability from certain defined liability risks at the insurer's cost in exchange for payment of a premium. So that ultimately means that is what you pay for. So then if for some reason one of your staff members does leave a wait and doesn't clean up or doesn't do a proper procedure, the institution might be getting sued itself. And this is why you have liability insurance. So if someone got injured, that you've paid a premium, and if, say, X amount of cost goes to, let's just say, the individual, that you are covered. Okay, strength and conditioning. Professionals should consult their human resource manager, a legal consultant, and a professional organization, for example, the NSCA, to go with all of this. So the liability of the products themselves, they use the equipment only for the purpose intended by the manufacturer, right? So someone shouldn't be using a treadmill in a silly way, right? So if someone decides to a treadmill with the, if someone decides to try to run backwards or jog backwards with a blindfold on, let's just say, for example, that is not how it was intended use for the manufacturer, right? So those are the type of facts that you need to know and understand if someone is going to use equipment improperly, that you may not be liable for those misuses of equipment. Buy only equipment from reputable manufacturers. Might be nice to look at the price tag and say, oh, this one looks really, really cheap. But if the reviews and they're a newer company and you do not know the warranties or certain things on those, make sure you are buying certain things from reputable manufacturers. Don't modify equipment unless such adaptations are clearly designed and instructed for doing so and are included in the product information. So again, don't mess around with the equipment unless you know what you're doing and it's a piece of equipment that allows you to do so. Okay. So continuing on with product liability, right? Apply all warning labels that accompany a new equipment purchase. Continually inspect equipment for damage, wear and tear, and that may place someone at risk of injury. Don't allow unsupervised athletes to use equipment, right? So don't just allow them in to use the equipment, and especially new equipment that the staff is still getting used to using. All right, so now we move on to discipline and what happens when someone violates your rules and your procedures. Someone's first offense, for example, would be a verbal warning by a staff member, an explanation of the nature and importance of the rule or the guideline that was broken, right? So usually a staff member will go up to the person and give them a verbal warning and say, hey, this is a verbal warning. You're not allowed to do that. You understand the rules, and then explain why. A second offense is usually dismissal from the facility for that day. So if that person doesn't listen to you and they come back and do it again, it's their second offense, then you're just like, okay, most times a staff member is going to say, you're dismissed for the day. Then they also document the offense by the staff member, correspondence with the athlete's sport coach, and they go talk to them about that. A third offense is a dismissal from the facility for a full week. So if someone has the brains to come back and do that one more time, they document that. You're supposed to document that, list the offense, and list that it's the third offense, and you correspond with the athlete as well as the athlete's sport coach. And that student athlete is no longer allowed in that facility for 1 full week. A fourth offense is dismissal for the remainder of the year. Documentation, this becomes, as you can see, this is progressively more serious, right? Athlete sports code is informed. Same with the athletic director and all of that other stuff. And this is heavily documented. Fifth offense is a permanent dismissal from the facility, right? So if someone comes back after a fourth offense, was dismissed for the remainder of the year, and then broke the rules and regulations again, then this is where someone would be dismissed and not allowed back to the facility once and for all. Okay, again, we can reference the strength and conditioning professional standards and guidelines. Highly suggest you take a look at that. These are supplements, ergogenic aids, and banned substances, right? So we've talked about this quite a bit this semester and in other classes. But you as the strength and conditioning professional, say you're owning or working in a facility, needs to know all the rules and regulations regarding supplements, ergogenic aids, and specific banned substances in the NCAA, in high school sports, as well as, in professional sports. Okay, so it's important for us to know that strength and conditioning professionals must not prescribe, recommend, or provide drugs, controlled substances, or supplements that are illegal, right, for the purpose, including enhancing athletic performance or conditioning or physique. However, you need to be knowledgeable of what those are and to know what is banned and what is properly used. All right, so reporting and documentation. So additional records that should be developed and maintained. Credentials, standard guidelines, policies and procedures, equipment user manuals, and equipment facility maintenance. Okay, so reporting and documentation continued. We have participation of medical clearance, return to participation clearance. That is very, very important. So if someone says has an injury, or let's just say has a concussion, and they are dismissed from practicing, do not just believe a student that comes back and is like, no, I'm good. I'm cleared to go. I can practice today. You need written clearance from a medical doctor or someone who has physically examined that athlete, that is signed, that says, yes, this athlete is allowed to participate in sports again, or it might say light activity, or may be able to practice and competitiveness in 2 to 3 weeks, so to speak, right? So you have to follow the doctor's orders on that part. That is very, very important. Different legal documents. We've talked about informed consents, waivers, blah, blah, blah. Training logs, evaluation entries, and instruction notes. Participants should complete and sign such legal documents at annual orientation meeting, right? So these are all very important training logs, evaluation entries, instruction notes, always to have on file, right? You never know when you're going to need to reference them, and it's very important you keep these type of files organized. All right, so let's talk a little bit about code of ethics and professionalism. Strength and conditioning professionals should become familiar with the NSCA specific code of ethics, their institution's code of ethics, and student athlete code of conduct. Athlete welfare is generally the primary focus. So, just as you all in the exercise science department have a code of ethics that we expect you to abide by, right? And you sign that student handbook that says you abide by our code of ethics, our responsibility, and all of that, including plagiarism, this and that, and the respect for peers and whatnot. It's the same thing, right? You have to abide by the NSCA code of ethics. So for example, especially if you're a strength and conditioning facility, that is the body that is overseeing usually a lot of this, and are the procedures that you want to follow. And then specifically your own institution's code of ethics and student athlete code of conduct, right? So for example, at AIC, there might be a code of ethics and student athlete code of conduct within the athletic department itself, and it might be slightly different, let's just say from Western New England's, or from Bay Path's, or from Springfield College's, right? For the most part, everyone's code of ethics and student athlete expectations are very, very similar across the board. However, not only do you need to know the general governing body, which is NSCA, you need to know your own specific institutions, right? For supervision, your responsibilities, you must always be there. Be active and hands-on, prudent, careful, prepared, qualified, vigilant, inform participants on safety and emergency procedures, know participants' health status, and monitor and enforce rules and regulations, and monitor and scrutinize the environment, right? So it's very important that you are in charge. Sometimes if you're working with multiple athletes or a bigger team, it can kind of almost seem like a free-for-all. And if the head strength and conditioning coach or strength and conditioning coach in general does not have a handle on all of these things, that they are there on time, they treat athletes with respect, they know all the rules and regulations and enforce that, sometimes the athletes aren't going to take them seriously. And then what ended up happening is it becomes what's, pretty much almost like a free-for-all. And then at that point in time, what happens? Then the increased risk of injury occurs because people start to goof around more. You're dealing with heavy weights, then maybe the proper spotters aren't there for certain lifts. And what can happen? You increase the risk of injury, boom, injury, possible liability issue, right? So it really all starts with you, the staff, and how you run that facility and how seriously you take it and how important it is to explain to the athletes and to your other staff members, maybe you're in a supervisor role, importance of those rules and regulations. Okay, so when we talked about this a little bit before, the risk of injury cannot be totally eliminated, but it can be effectively managed by the strength and conditioning professional, right? So again, if you're kind of creating some sort of chaotic environment, then you may be found at fault because you're not enforcing the rules and regulations properly. However, for example, you can always do something 110% correct, have it organized, clean, everyone's got the proper number of spotters, everyone's following rules and regulations, but then boom, no matter what, someone thinks they can, lift a little bit heavier, something happens where, their muscle gets cramped up or they just can't make a proper lift or do something improper and they injure themselves, boom, they drop the weight on themselves and they become injured, right? It's nothing to your fault. Injuries happen, mistakes happen. So again, there's always some sort of inherent risk of injury, right? We talked about that. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so into our last video, we're going to be talking about program design, strength conditioning role, and who is overseeing these programs. Okay, so we will start with that on our third and final video for the procedures lecture.